suppose I look back now and I wish I'd been cleverer, I suppose. I had a member of my church, as a church leader, back in the mid-90s, and who came to me and said we should run the Alpha course. And I hadn't just heard of it. I was keeping a bit of a low profile with, got fed up with evangelistic initiatives that hadn't really worked. And this seemed to be something else. And but I think we all have members in our churches who kind of badger us and push us. And Mike wasn't for giving up, and he was all for running this thing called the Alpha course. So I asked what it was, and it was a course on God. And I think I remember saying something like, "That'll never catch on."
Mm-hmm.
And it just seemed to be a very strange idea. Why would anybody want to do that? And but we had some members who were working on a mission with other churches in Aberdeen. The Logos boat had been in town, and there was folk hanging around who they didn't want to do church, but they didn't want to go away either. And so we were just looking for something to do with them. And I said, "Well, look, I suppose we could do that." And Mike had said, "Well, we could do it with another church," and the Elam church down the road had been running it, and they had to have a couple of members who come from Holy Trinity Brompton, and it had gone to them kind of organically. The course had started there in Aberdeen, and I thought, well, if we do this, probably if folk do become Christians, one, I'll be surprised, but two, they'll probably go to the other church. And that's how small-minded I was. But we ran it, we did this joint course with the Elam church, and a number of folk became Christians. Some came to our church, some went to the Elam church, and it was really the first time we'd seen anything work in ages. And really from there we just kept running Alpha, small ones in houses and bigger ones in our church, for youth and in various ways. And I suppose I became a real fan of it. One as a pastor, it was just lovely to be doing stuff which was the folks who didn't do church, and hanging out with them, hearing their stories, sitting down in a kind of hospitable way, eating with folks. I was brought up with evangelism as kind of a big stick from a distance kind of stuff. We shouted at people. My vivid recollection of evangelism or street preachers on the Mound in Edinburgh and on Sauchiehall Street in Glasgow, and that kind of a thing, and nobody was listening in culture. Everybody had gone beyond that, and this was a whole new way that I could be an evangelist and that we could do stuff with folks who didn't do church. And so that's really how I got involved. I was pushed into it. I wasn't clever enough, and obviously I was well wrong, because 16 million people have done Alpha worldwide, and it's in 160 countries, and there's loads of courses. The fantastic bit for me is there's loads of courses around Scotland with all sorts of churches doing it. Catholic churches, Church of Scotland, Baptist, Pentecost, everybody really getting in and about and doing something that they never thought they could do, called evangelism, which we thought was kind of broken, really. So, I suppose my initial thing was this would work for a while, and it was kind of maybe a bit, kind of the modern era's kind of passed over. Everybody talks about the postmodern, and you think maybe Alpha, it'll work for a while, and then we'll work on something else. But I think the thing that's kind of shocked us all is it just kept on working, and that's why I suppose clever people like Graham Tomlin, the theologian, have started to look at Alpha and trying to puzzle out why that's the case. And actually, I think there's elements of Alpha which are much more contemporary than we actually imagined. The whole kind of being hospitable to people, and journeying with people, and allowing for people to kind of grow in what the truth would be, and belong before they believe. All that's kind of in Alpha, and I think it wasn't really designed in, but we've discovered that the stuff in it actually still works, and therefore it's kind of lasted a lot better. And I think the other thing that's made it kind of have a new lease of life is that folks have contextualised it more. So folks are sort of saying, well, how would this work for old folks, and how would this work for young people, and how would this work in a prison, and folks have been just really creative and taken Alpha and thought, right, well, the core of it is the same, but we're going to go and do it in a different way if it's in the forces or whatever. And found kind of like, we'll do it in big print for folks, for older folk if they need that, we'll do it this way and make it look kind of really kind of funky and up to date. For younger guys, we'll mix it with games. If it's amongst students, it'll be like this. So that really, rather than just running it down at the church, folks are saying, the church is saying, well, we'll run it with our mates in different places, in Costa and here and there. And I think that contextualisation, so it's not an attractional thing, but reaching people where they're at kind of thing, has opened up a whole new vista and really increased the number of courses that we're seeing running in Scotland. I think places like Craig Inch's prison, in Aberdeen, it's great to see there. It's running in other prisons as well. That encourages me. I love to see it on campuses. I think that's exciting. In Edinburgh, running it there, running it in different places. I think in Stirling, Alpha running for international students, amongst Chinese students particularly, and really, folks coming from abroad to Scotland to find the gospel, find the good news, and I think that's mega exciting that that we're involved in global mission even here at home. So it's not just kind of local folks. So they're pretty exciting. we spend a lot of our time, I think most questions we get at Alpha Scotland are actually about pre-Alpha. How do you get people there? And post-Alpha, what do you do once they come? And I think for me the biggest shock was the first Alpha we were involved in was a group of people looking back at us saying, we're not leaving, what can we do now? And we think, we didn't expect this, because most folk when we did evangelistic things just were nowhere to be seen afterwards. And so you're thinking, right, what next, as you say? I think there are lots of resources, but the key thing is to keep folk together. In the culture we have, you call it postmodern, call it contemporary Scotland, folks love hanging out with their mates. And on Alpha, people make friends, and they can be all young people, it can be a mixed group, but they've gone on a journey, and they're just, if you keep them together and can keep giving them stuff to work around, and use a similar kind of food, hospitality, getting around God's word, being really open to folks. Some folk might have committed to Jesus, others might not, allowing folk to stay around. If you keep the journey going and keep folks together, you can't go far wrong. I think often folks say, well, finished Alpha, that's it, and just try and push them into a Sunday service, and that's not their community. And I think that's what we often forget. This group they formed with, even one small group within an Alpha course, which maybe has another couple of small groups, it's just that group. That's where their loyalty is. And they're finding Jesus and they're finding each other, and keeping that together. We've got resources, challenging lifestyle, we've got a new thing called Faith Track. A lot of young guys who come into faith have no sense of just how the big Christian picture hangs together, how they explain that to their mates. So we've done some basic theology stuff, and for a lot of young guys, anyway, really want to know how this works, and once they get, keen, so we're really trying to give resources to groups like that. But I say just keep the cell group together, keep just serving that, hosting that, and if God's at work in people's hearts, it kind of works, but don't bust it up. I think I liked a phrase Graham Tomlin came up with, which was he calls it living public Christian lives, and just living a joyful outward existence which isn't really overt in people's faces. I think people hate that. I don't particularly like it either. And I think sometimes we go under the radar. There's we're in a too low profile as Christians, and we just need to have that God's joy be in our hearts and just be around. And I think folks notice more than we think. And it's when people have moments in their lives they're struggling. They say, so what is it about you? What is it about? And I think, in the Bible it says, we're to give a reason for the hope that we have. And I think living that, just that really, working well, doing our work to an excellent standard, not backbiting, not gossiping. I think it's the stuff we don't do, which people just it stands out far more than we think. I know my wife, she was, the work she was asked about, and she said, you don't join in with any of this gossip, why is that, So then I think conversations happen kind of from there. So I don't know, we have to do too much. I think we're all ready if we're kind of living it out. And I think the other thing is living out in community. When we're kind of sharing between us and church, we're building community. Folks observe that. I remember, before I moved down to Glasgow, with other folk in the church close to where I lived, and we'd share cars and things like that. And if a car broke down, you could use mine. And our neighbours were perplexed by that. And that led to, those are the things that lead to questions that you can start to explain. And I think those are the things that lead to, we've got this thing on called Alpha. If you want to find out more, and it's just a meal and a chat and stuff. And people, okay. It gives people an opportunity. Yeah, I think there are evangelists, and I think we maybe misunderstood it. I think evangelists, like all the ministry gifts of the church, are meant to equip God's people to do evangelism. The one person who would never claim to be an evangelist is Nicky Gumbel, who was the one who founded the Alpha course. And to be honest, if you look at him, you wouldn't think he's an evangelist. He wouldn't claim to be an evangelist. And yet, through Alpha, he's equipped more churches and more people to share their faith. So that, to me, makes him an evangelist par excellence, really, because he's really done equipping other people to share their faith. And that's what I think evangelists increasingly are doing. So I think that is a real ministry. And it's one of the things we're really trying to promote is encouraging folk to do have that passion for Jesus, a passion to help other people do that. So to move them away from they're doing it all and the church is spectating, to actually, they're stirring up communities, they're training them how to share their faith, they're working into churches, they've got a confidence in the gospel, that's contagious, and I think that's the role for evangelists, and I think we need loads of them, just like we need loads of pastors, prophets and teachers and administrators and helpers and kids ministry. We need them all, and we certainly need evangelists too, but I think it's changing, and evangelists are being raised up in a kind of new model, which is I think is good for Scotland.